Bongani Majola. We have board members of the Foundation for Human Rights who are here. We have commissioners from various Chapter 9 institutions. I think they are sitting over here. Please, those who are here, please stand or wave. You are most welcome. Thank you very much. And then we have members of the Sisulu family sitting over there, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They've come to celebrate. And we have representatives from various government departments who are here. Again, we won't mention, we understand that some ministers will join us a little later. So you are welcome. And life cannot go on in South Africa without civil society organizations. So all of the representatives of the civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations who are here, please wave so that we can know you are here. You are all welcome to this wonderful occasion. And please, if you have not been acknowledged, it's not that we disregard the importance of your attendance today. The list is long. All of you, please feel welcome. On that score, I will now like to ask the Minister, Michael Masuta, to please come and sit here, because we are going to now at this point, we hope that the people who are supposed to press the button will press the button. Could we all rise for the singing of our anthems? Who's pressing? Who's pressing the button? Thank you very much. We have one anthem for today. Thank you very much. Before the minister comes forward, I was asked to just remind us that our programs are with us, and you will see in the back page of our program that we have come to reflect, to engage, to deal with issues of promotion, and to deal with the issues of protecting human rights, not only in South Africa, but in the world. The minister will tell us why it is important to do that. I will then hand over to our minister to come and address us on the importance of this day and why we have 70 in our program that we have written in very, very bold print. Over to you, Minister.
Program Director, Ms. Togom Pumlwana, also Chair of the Foundation for Human Rights, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the United Nations, the High Commissioner of the European Union, all other representatives of the United Nations and other international bodies, diplomatic corps, all other dignitaries present here today, colleagues from all walks, representing various civil society formations and other organs of society, I greet you all. We are gathered here today on a very special occasion as we're about to celebrate on the 10th of December, the International Human Rights Day. It occurs at a time when we are in the process of ensuring that we end violence against women and children in our nation through the 16 days of activism against violence against women and children. Today, we gather here on the occasion as we celebrate 70 years of the adoption in 1948, in the aftermath of the Second World War, of the UN Declaration on Human Rights. We gather today as we commemorate 22 years of the signing by our icon Utata Rolihlahla Mandela of our Constitution, in particular as it contains the Bill of Rights, which in many respects mirrors the UN Human Rights Declaration. We also converge here today as we celebrate the 100th birthday and therefore celebrate a life well lived of two icons in our struggle for liberation and democracy, Utata Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela and Omama Albertina Sisulu, who side by side fought many battles, including on this premises upon which we gathered today, which hosts today our apex court that has a final say on that very Constitution and Bill of Rights, which Utata Mandela signed on the 10th of December, 22 years ago. So it's a very special moment. Of course, a moment of reflection on how far we have come through the long walk to freedom, to be here. And we should use this occasion to also celebrate the many others, heroes and heroines of our struggle for freedom, who selflessly gave up not only all the luxuries of life, but life itself, who shed their blood that nourished the tree of freedom, that bears the fruit that we have the privilege of enjoying today. This campaign is an endeavor of the Constitutional Rights Education Working Group, CREWG, an initiative of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development in partnership with the Foundation for Human Rights, FHR, other key government departments, the South African Human Rights Commission, SAHRC, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and civil society groups. It aims to refocus attention on educating people on human rights by drawing inspiration from the values and principles of human rights as espoused by Utata Nelson Mandela and Umama Albertina Sisulu, the Constitution of South Africa, and the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In line with the proposed national centenary celebrations and this important commemorative year marked by a global recommitment to human rights, the proposed theme for the 2018 Human Rights Campaign is, quote, Nelson Mandela, Albertina Sisulu, and the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. From struggle icons to human rights activists, to hope for South Africa and the world. This is an invitation to all interested organizations and stakeholders working in South Africa to come on board and support this initiative. Activities may include seminars, events, sporting events, academic discussions, cultural and other activities that celebrate and advance the promotion and protection of human rights. The background to this is that the year 2018 marks, as I said, the 70th anniversary of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, a milestone in the history of humanity and human rights in the world. Adopted in 1948, on the 10th of December, the UDHR defined the fundamental human rights to be universally protected and recognized, the inherent dignity, equality, and inalienability of rights of all human beings. Over the past 7 decades, the UDHR is regarded as one of the pillars of a global ethic, a common conscience for humanity, having played a significant role in sustaining morale amongst the oppressed, in legitimizing their struggles, and in recognizing human rights violations globally. The 70th anniversary commemorative year of the UDHR 70 will bring together 3 mutually reinforcing pathways Firstly, to promote, engage, and reflect. The promote and engage aspects of the campaign will build upon the ongoing momentum and existing initiatives at the international level, including within the United Nations and its human rights mechanisms, and through the global and You for Human Rights campaign. The reflect aspect will also build on these ongoing initiatives and will add to them by taking stock of the state of human rights today. It will further address emerging issues and challenges and identify what is required to move the agenda forward. 2018 represents a unique opportunity for South Africa to renew its commitment to the principles enshrined in the Constitution and the UDHR. South Africa's Constitution was born out of the global fight against injustice and the atrocities of the Second World War, and was informed and drew inspiration from the UDHR. The UDHR and Madiba's vision is not only relevant for South Africans to reflect on, but it is also the beacon of hope for the rest of the world that aims to create a just and better world for all and to eradicate poverty, inequality, injustice, and underdevelopment in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. UDHR 70 provides an occasion to take stock of the human rights achievements since 1948, but also set agenda and vision for the future. To commemorate its anniversary, a number of events are being organized across the globe, which will include key events marking 7 decades in different countries and regions, starting from the east to the west. With the convergence of the Mandela and Sisulu centenaries, as well as South Africa's historic relationship to the UNDHR and the UDHR's influence on the South African Constitution, South Africa has been identified as an important location to host one of the key events in Africa. On 29 January 2018, President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana launched the celebration of the UDHR 70 on behalf of Africa at the margins of the 30th African Union, that is AU Summit, in Addis Ababa. President Akufo-Addo recalled that since its adoption on 10th December 1948, the UDHR has been the basis of considerable advances in the universal protection of human rights and on the continent, and said that, quote, having overcome several trials and tribulations, such as slavery, imperialism, colonialism, tyranny, and dictatorship, the African peoples continue to chalk significant successes in advancing the promotion and respect for human rights in their governance, close quote. He encouraged African states to ensure that the fight for the protection and respect of human rights remains a constant one. At the January 2018 African Union Summit, heads of states also took a decision to observe the year 2018 as the Nelson Mandela centenary and decided to convene a meeting in honor of Nelson Mandela at its 31st ordinary session of the AU Assembly held in Nouakchott, Mauritania in July 2018. They also expressed support for the holding of a peace summit under the theme Strengthening the Role of the United Nations in the Promotion and Maintenance of International Peace, building at the margins of the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly on 17 September 2018, and urged all African Union members to support and observe the Nelson Mandela centenary and recommit themselves to the human rights ideals and values espoused by Nelson Mandela. With regard to the South African context, during the 16 February 2018 State of the Nation address, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa dedicated 2018 to the centenary of Nelson Mandela and Albertina Sisulu. He remarked that the centenary marked a new dawn and a period of hope as we remember both Mandela and Sisulu and live and reclaim their values and build a better life for all South Africans. President Ramaphosa called on South Africans to put behind them the period of despair, negativity, disillusionment, and distrust in institutions and leadership, and move towards consolidating South Africa's democracy and build a shared future towards prosperity for all, whilst guided by the ethical behavior and leadership as exemplified by Utata Mandela and Umama Sisulu. The government launched its Tuma Mina campaign earlier this year, calling on all South Africans to become involved in community and societal issues facing South Africans, and to help build South Africa to its deserved glory. President Ramaphosa coined the Tuma Mina campaign as part of what he called a new dawn in his first State of Nation address. In the run-up to Nelson Mandela International Day on 18 July 2018, Cabinet also called on all South Africans to be the legacy, in quotes, of Nelson Mandela, noting that the United Nations adopted this day, which allows South Africans and the global community to honor our former president. As part of the centenary celebrations, various sectors have embarked on a number of initiatives to pay tribute to the work and legacy of the late President Nelson Mandela. Cabinet called on all people to become part of the movement of change by working together as a united, non-racial, and non-sexist society established on human rights and constitutional values in order to uphold Madiba's legacy as an international icon. South African women also played a critical role in the struggle for national liberation and for the assertion of women's rights in particular as part of human rights. Umamu Albertina Sisulu's centenary provides an opportunity to recognize their courage, fortitude, and dedication of Mama Sisulu and other women past and present, and to reclaim their contribution to our constitutional democracy and the advancement of human rights in South Africa and elsewhere. Mama Albertina Sisulu was a fearless champion and campaigner for democracy and human rights, and worked tirelessly to build a better and more equitable and united South Africa, ensuring that all people in South Africa enjoy the benefits of freedom and democracy. And recognizing the role played by Mama Sisulu, it is also important to acknowledge that the role of women in the struggle for freedom and equality, which has received insufficient public attention and acknowledgement, must now be recognized in the annals of history alongside their male compatriots. As the world celebrates the centenary of Utatu Mandela and Umamu Sisulu, we reflect on the many accomplishments South Africa has made from the date of democracy, and as we approach the first quarter of a century to be done to achieve the vision of Mandela for a just, equitable, and inclusive South Africa where all share in the fruits of freedom. The negotiations leading to the first democratic elections in 1994 created an interim constitution which was subsequently signed into law as the final constitution on 10 December 1996 at Sharpeville, honored as the cradle of human rights in South Africa. The Bill of Rights in the Constitution is quote, cornerstone of democracy in South Africa, close quote. It enshrines the rights and equities of all people who live in South Africa and affirms the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. It places obligations upon the state to quote, respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights, close quote, in the Bill of Rights. The Constitution is globally revered for its progressive Bill of Rights, the justiciability of all rights, including economic, social, and cultural rights, the entrenched independent judiciary, and the creation of Code Chapter 9 institutions and code to support the constitutional democracy, promote and protect human rights, and uphold the rule of law. In 1994, at the dawn of South Africa's democracy, the country was and remains one of the most unequal countries in the world. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission that aimed to achieve restorative justice was an innovation for the global community. South Africa receives continuing acclaim for its approach. However, its impact in changing the lives of ordinary citizens has been challenged at a time when South Africa remains one of the most unequal countries in the world, thanks to a legacy that lasted nearly a century that resulted in these huge inequalities that today remains a seemingly intractable challenge. With unemployment at 27% and poverty at 55%, to quote State South Africa, the South African Human Rights Commission's July 2018 Equality Report highlights the need for the government's radical socio-economic transformation agenda to be rights-based and achieve substantive socio-economic equality in an era where poverty has increased in South Africa and income and wealth inequality remains amongst the highest. Furthermore, a baseline survey conducted by the Foundation for Human Rights found that awareness of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and Chapter 9 institutions is still worryingly low, that knowledge of the Constitution was lowest in marginalized and vulnerable communities who are supposed to be the greatest beneficiaries of the dividend of democracy and the Bill of Rights. This falls short of the vision and ideals held by Madiba and Sisulu and those who fought for freedom, and must be addressed with utmost urgency. It also speaks to the need to strengthen constitutional rights literacy and address South Africa's triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, focusing on the needs of youth, as Africa has the youngest population in the world, and youth constitute 36% of South Africa's population. A society with high levels of illiteracy and innumeracy and 11 official languages, such as South Africa presents a particular challenge in educating people about their constitution, their rights, and their responsibilities. Government and civil society organizations have an important role to play in ensuring accountability for human rights violations and abuses, as well as adherence to obligations to respect, promote, protect, and fulfill human rights. There remains an urgent need to increase awareness of the rights and values contained in the Constitution in order to foster a culture where people know and can claim their rights. In particular, I wish to use this platform to urge South Africans to tackle the two major challenges that continue to plague our society. Firstly, escalating violence, especially as it's directed at women and children, especially on the occasion when we continue in our activism in the fight against the scourge. Secondly, we need to tackle greed in our society, which result in corruption and other aberrations that continue to hold back our nation from moving forward in its developmental trajectory. The National Development Plan, NDP, states that in 2030, South Africans will be more conscious of things they have in common than their differences. Their lived experiences will progressively undermine and cut across the divisions of race, gender, disability, space, and class. The nation will be more accepting of people's multiple identities. Outcome 14 of the NDP, in particular on nation building and social cohesion, aims to reduce inequality of opportunity, redress, enabling the sharing of common space, awakening the populace to speak when things go wrong and to be active in their own development, as well as engendering the knowledge of the Constitution and fostering the values contained therein, especially the Bill of Rights. The NDP informs government's program of action, POA, for the current medium-term strategic framework through outcome 14, nation building and social cohesion. In line with the objectives set in the Cabinet's approved program of action on outcome 14, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, in collaboration with the Foundation for Human Rights and other key stakeholders and partners, hosted a colloquium on constitutional rights education in July 2015. The colloquium recommended, amongst others, the creation of an intersectoral body to coordinate programs for increasing constitutional education and human rights awareness. Thus, The Constitutional Rights Education Working Group was established, comprising of various key government departments, Chapter 9 institutions, and civil society organizations, with the objective of coordinating programs to increase awareness of human rights and strengthen efforts relating to constitutional education. May I therefore take this opportunity to welcome you all to this auspicious occasion. We look forward to your active involvement even beyond this day as you continue to advance the course enunciated by this event. I thank you all.
Thank you, Minister. I think the High Commissioner now knows that we have been at work. We have reported to you, ma'am, and people who are here are really committed activists for human rights and for a good society. That's why we are all here. We are committing ourselves to that. Thank you, Minister, for those opening remarks and welcoming all of us. We are now going to change gears. We said today is a day of reflection, so we have a panel of the Sisulu family, the Mandela Foundation Human Rights Commission, and Albie Sachs representing the origins of the Constitution, who will just reflect on this Constitution of ours, these celebrations of today, and the journey we have taken. And as you can see, colleagues who are running behind, so do bear with us. We will ask you to speak virtually off the card. We want your highlights of the journey traveled. I would like to ask Peter Chivuti to come, representing the Sisulu family. Please give a hand for Peter. Umkhwenyana, we call him Umkhwenyana. This is a son-in-law to the Sisulu family. He's a Sisulu. Please take a seat. And then we'd like to have Silo Hatang, please come. He needs no introduction. We would like to ask Advocate Majola from the Human Rights Commission, please come. And Advocate Sachs, please, you will come. But I think we probably, at this point, ask the minister to swap seats with the judge, if the minister does not mind. You are still going to come back to introduce the president, Minister. Thank you very much. So, I will ask Peter to please come, your 5 minutes, and then in that order, you will just reflect, all of you, because we don't have mic, so you have to come here. Thank you. Please bear with us. The noise is a bit disturbing, but I guess it's part of our celebration. Please come.
Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, High Commissioner, thank you for joining us. Minister, Justice, ladies and gentlemen. Mine is very short, and I'd like to start with Wathinta Bafazi. Wathinta Bafazi. You know, South Africa and the Constitution in itself is a journey. The preamble talks to people and respecting that dignity, inherent dignity within those people. The fight for Africa, for human rights, and the Charter of Human and People's Rights is adopted in 1979 by the OAU in Addis Ababa, based on the journey that was of the human and people's rights in the Americas and the European Commission. really talks to an Africa that was already developing human rights. And the Constitution, as it was adopted in 1996, following the interim Constitution, is just a manifestation of that hard work. But to speak to Gogo, as we affectionately know her, Albertina Sisulu, if we recall, she was the first anti-apartheid leader to meet Margaret Thatcher and George Bush officially at 10 Downing Street and in the White House. And it is that same stature that also led her to bringing people like Save the Children and UNICEF to South Africa. So not only was she fighting for everybody, she was also able, as a woman leader, to highlight the plight of not only women, but children. And it's really that nuanced affection that she had for her people that allowed us to have the freedom that we have today, amongst many others. The key tenets of human rights, the bedrock of dignity and equality and freedom that is enshrined in the Constitution, as well as the Chapter 9 institutions that are in that Constitution that sort of galvanize and protect those human rights, are really what we should be focusing on. And the message is really to make sure that those institutions are well-resourced, are well-capacitated in order for that continuation to continue. So with those short words, I'd like to say thank you very much. And in celebration of the 70th year of the Universal Declaration, we as a Sisulu family would like to acknowledge and respect that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director Me Togo Mpumlwana. Former President Michelle Bachelet, for us you are not former President of Chile, but rather you are one of our own because you delivered the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture. So welcome back home. Dignitaries of the UN, cabinet ministers, judges here present, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. I think you'll agree with me that 2018 has been an extraordinary year of anniversaries. The centenary of Nelson Mandela's birth, the centenary of Masisulu's birth, the 94th birthday of Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe just 2 days ago, the passing of Mamwini Madikizela Mandela, and of course, just a couple of days ago, the passing of Ntate Mendy Msimang and Alex Borain. The 70th anniversary of the United Declaration of Human Rights, 25th anniversary of the Nobel Peace Prize being awarded to Madiba and F.W. de Klerk, 20th anniversary of the South African TRC process. What a great legacy, what a rich legacy for all of us. What strong shoulders we stand on. I want to just evoke Madiba here when he said, there can be no peace, no lasting security, no prosperity in this land unless all enjoy freedom and justice as equals. Out of the many sharp wills which haunt our history was born the unshakable determination that respect for human life, liberty, and well-being must be enshrined as rights beyond the power of any force to diminish. I think at this point, I want to remember two lives, but there are many others that these represent. I want to remind you of Viwe Jali, who died in a pit latrine, who was followed by Michael Komape, who died in 2014 under similar circumstances. With these two, we want to say to the likes of Section 27, may you continue to make sure that the Constitution does not serve only the privileged, those who have the money to can pay for services in courts, but that the Michael Komapes, the Viwe Jalis get justice too through the Constitution. In our country, that we must not just be focusing just on these lives, but to be saying, how do we change structures of power? How is it possible that a child who is 4 years old, if they come from a particular place where they were born by accident of birth, they then get privileged against that who comes from a poor family? They become stunted. They suffer from stunting. These are the voices that we must today be remembering, Commissioner. These are the discarded voices, the forgotten, the alienated majority. How is it possible that 70 years on, we still have those with power advocating for more walls to be built to prevent the poor from coming in? How is it possible that as we think of people like who passed recently, such as Lalu Chiba, we then don't want to do better? I think this is not the country of Madiba's dreams. It's certainly not Masisulu's dream to have these kind of challenges. We owe them more. We must do better. We must do differently. The call for us is not to do more, as I said, but rather to do differently. And I want to end off with a note that says, this is when Madiba was marking the struggle of the Palestinians. I want to quote him when he says, when in 1977, the United Nations passed the resolution inaugurating the International Day of Solidarity with the people of Palestine, it was asserting the recognition that injustice and cross-human rights violations were being perpetrated in Palestine. In the same period, the UN took a strong stand against apartheid, and over the years, an international consensus was built, which helped to bring an end to this iniquitous system. But we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the people of Palestine, without the resolution of conflicts of East Timor, the Sudan, and other parts of the world. I think this, for me, means that we must then be recommitting ourselves to the key values of Madiba, of human solidarity, of ensuring that there's greater respect for life, poor or rich. That, as I finish off with a story, an anecdote of meeting Ntate Goldberg, Ntate Mlangeni, and Ntate Ahmed Kathrada, when the three of them were saying, we'll continue to run until such time that life is taken out of our bodies. May we run in the name of human rights until there's equity across the world. Happy anniversary.
Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Minister of Justice, Your Excellency, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, ambassadors here, ministers, judges, and everybody who is here, all protocols observed. It's a very great honor for me to be part of this celebration of 70 years of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Today we are looking both backwards and forward. We are reflecting, and we are also looking at what next to do. We know that today, this month is the 70th anniversary of the declaration. It's the anniversary of many other things that have been mentioned, but from the human rights field, I know that this year, in fact, December, is the 25th anniversary of the Paris Principles governing the national human rights institutions like mine. It's the 20th anniversary of the declaration to reflect, But let me go back to the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and say that analysts say that when it was conceptualized and adopted, the aim was not to create a binding document. As a result, there was no signing that was required. South Africa was part of the discussion, and South Africa at that time, even though it was not to be signed by anything, registered an abstention because they felt that it was too wide. Nevertheless, no one voted against it. Everybody supported it except the 18 that abstained, including South Africa. But flying back to where we are today, we see that the Universal Declaration on Human Rights has actually acquired a force of its own, even though it was initially intended not to be binding, in the sense that many states have adopted it in their constitutions, and even those that have not adopted it in their constitution, you find decisions that show that it gets referred to from time to time. Somebody suggested recently that they think that it has already acquired the status of international customary law. Now, we have a constitution that, as you have said, that largely adopts the provisions or the rights that are provided for in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But when we cast our minds back, we should remember where we come from. We come from a situation that was oppressive, that denied these rights. I remember that already before the adoption of the system of apartheid, the seeds for apartheid were already being sown. There were divisions on the basis of race that were manifesting itself. And in 1934, you'll recall that in the case of Sachs versus Minister of Justice, if I may quote, the judges themselves took the view that Parliament may make any encroachment it chooses upon the life, liberty, or property of any individual subject to its sway, and it is the function of the courts of law to enforce it. That is where we come from. Of course, we know that in 1948, apartheid was then adopted, and if you look at the constitutions that were passed thereafter, they entrenched this practice and made it the policy that governed the country. So while in 1948, the rest of the world was moving towards the recognition of human rights, South Africa was marching in a different direction, adopting apartheid and passing constitutions that actually said that Parliament is supreme and that no court of law could actually inquire into the validity of such legislation. And this went on for a very long time, because if you look at later cases, like cases in the late 70s, the early 80s, and so on, they still maintained this attitude. And when instruments such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Geneva Conventions were invoked, as it was done in the case of Patani, our judges would hold that these are not part of South African law and that they are also not part of international customary law, which then meant that the rights of the majority of the people of this country would continue to be violated. But it is interesting that in spite of all these difficulties, the people of this country never lost hope. They struggled on, they fought on. And they followed the actions of leaders such as the late President Nelson Mandela, and they joined in their thousands, you know. I recall the case in 1960 of the late Godfrey Piche, who was an article clerk at the time, who went to a magistrate's court and refused to sit in at a table that was reserved for non-white lawyers. He was convicted, he was found guilty and punished, but that never dampened his spirit to fight against apartheid. Today, of course, we have a different scenario. We've got a constitution that encompasses the rights in the Universal Declaration. And I think we should celebrate it the more so because looking back at where we come from, we can see what we have gained as South Africans from the Declaration and other human rights institutions. Due to lack of time, I'm not going to deal with the current because some of my colleagues on the panel have already dealt with that. But I'd like to say we in the Human Rights Commission are very happy to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Declaration and hope that the fact that the Declaration is now becoming international customary law, it will influence other countries, both in the continent and beyond, to uphold human rights. Thank you.
It comes as a bit of a shock to me to discover that I can recall the 50th anniversary of events that I took part in. And in 1968, the 20th anniversary of the Universal Declaration, I'm in exile in London and I'm asked by the ANC to make a comment on the UDHR. And I went through it line by line, word by word, to prove that South Africa violated every single one of the clauses there, except for one. It's the right to intellectual property. I struggled very hard to prove that even that one was included. I couldn't. I move forward to something I'd like somebody to pass on to the High Commissioner. A very special link with Chile. 1977, I go to Mozambique. There were hundreds of Chilean refugees there. And those of us then working with the ANC immediately felt a tremendous kinship with them. And we had a beautiful music group that would be singing our freedom songs, and we would hear the songs of the Chilean music group, Victor Jara. We painted with the Chilean Unidad Popular artists, murals in Maputo. We marched with them on May Day. They were the best organized of all the marches. And we had a big wonder who would get home first. Would the Chileans get back home or the South Africans? And the Chileans beat us by 1 year. Went home in 89, we went home in 90. But somehow we went home to take the initiative, to really lead the whole process of getting a new constitution. The Chilean refugees, I think, had very difficult years, ultimately culminating in the High Commissioner becoming the president to really get that country moving forward in a very progressive way. Nelson Mandela first visited the site as a professional, then as a prisoner, then as a president, and finally as a pensioner. And this is the site of the old Fort Prison, We always say with a very dubious pride, we South Africans have the only jail in the world where both Gandhi and Mandela were locked up. Nobody else can make that claim. And there is a Gandhi story that I think deserves to be better known, particularly in relation to the accusations that Gandhi was a racist. And I heard the story in 2002. It was the Earth Summit, was held in Johannesburg. We had a meeting of judges to deal with sustainable development. This building was still in the course of construction, the new court. And Indus Naidu came to introduce the visiting judges to the prison. His grandfather had been locked up with Gandhi and taken to Gandhi as his adopted son. His grandmother was locked up, his mother was locked up, his father was locked up, he was locked up, his brother was locked up, his sister was locked up. The Naidu family knew prison in the struggle for freedom. And when his grandfather was locked up at one stage, this is 1914, the warders insisted that the prisoners of Indian origin wear the same caps that the black African prisoners were wearing. And Indus said, my grandfather said, no, they want to humiliate us, like they humiliate the black prisoners. And Gandhi said, you are wrong. We must wear those caps. We must wear them as pride, with pride. If we want to understand life as experienced by the most humble in our society, then we must live life as they live. And they wore that cap with pride. And when Gandhi went back to India to lead the independence struggle, he took that cap with him. So the famous Gandhi cap that became the symbol of the independence struggle in India was actually a cap that originated on the heads of black African prisoners in this prison. Mandela came here, Mandela and Tambo, the first black partnership in Johannesburg, to see his clients. He came here as a prisoner afterwards. He came here as a president. It was actually not in this space that in 1995, in a small room the size of this platform, not much bigger, temporary accommodation, he inaugurated our Constitutional Court. And he said, the last time I was in court was to find out if I was going to be sentenced to death. Today, I inaugurate South Africa's first Constitutional Court on which our democracy depends. And anybody, I'm not on the court anymore, I'm not bragging about my court, I'm telling the story of our court. Everybody accepts upholding the Constitution, the fundamental rights, and the democracy in our Constitution, bringing our President to account and bringing Parliament to account when they weren't doing their jobs properly under the Constitution, I think saved our country. A very important proclamation that he'd issued on the instructions of Parliament that dealt with the first democratic local government elections. They were positive, they were good. But we struck down those laws because we said under our Constitution, Parliament cannot entrust lawmaking authority to the President. Parliament itself must pass the laws. And how would Mandela react? We watched him on television the next day. Very serious. When I adopted these proclamations, I acted on legal advice that I had authority to do so. I now accept that that advice was wrong. It's a bit tough on poor Fink Haysom, who was his legal advisor. And I, as President of the country, must be the first to show respect for the Constitution as interpreted by the Constitutional Court. For me, that moment was as important for South Africa as the day we all voted as equals for the first time, which was shown on television. Because that was the day we moved from being a democracy to being a constitutional democracy. And that Constitution has held. And the Chapter 9 institutions have been doing their job to protect democracy. We have an independent judiciary. We have an independent electoral commission. And our democracy is strong. Just looking back now on those 50 years, then we were in exile. Now we're on South African soil, and we are justly saying our democracy is not doing well enough. But that's a huge advance. It's a huge advance. And I think it's the spirit that we incorporated in the constitutional making process, in which our president played an exceptionally important role, the text of the Constitution, and the faith that our people have in the Constitution, and the support they're giving to the court, and the delight that Parliament is now doing its job properly, and new enthusiasm about the presidency. These are the factors that make me feel that we can move ahead and deal with the justifiable complaints. Finally, I just want to say that our biggest contribution for those of us who've worked and served in this particular area, we're going to build a museum of the Constitution and an archive of the Constitution to tell this whole story, and how the Universal Declaration of Human Rights feeds in to the claims of our people going back a whole century to have a constitution with fundamental rights for everybody. So come back in 10 years' time, it will be somebody else, probably not me, celebrating the 70th year, but they will do that from the site of this new museum. And we want it to be a museum that's lively, not just recording the past. We can have debates on the land question. We can have debates on hate speech. We want, in particular, young people to feel enthusiastic and responsive, not to listen to old people like me, but to challenge, to be daring, to be sprightly as we were when we were young. Thank you.
We'll just take one round of questions. We still have at least about 10 minutes. I would like to give the audience an opportunity. If there's anyone who's burning to reflect or burning to ask a question, this is the moment. There are roving mics. There is a roving mic here, and there is another roving mic over there. This is an opportunity for you to ask your questions on any of the issues raised here. Let's hear. If not, I'll be disappointed. There's a question over there. Thank you. We need this side as well. Young people. There's a hand over there. One more question. There is one here. We are, okay. All right. I'll take the one. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. And then you respond, and then we close. Right. Number 1.
Very good morning to everybody. My name is Kamil Ali. I'm the former Secretary General of the WITS SRC and the current President of the Muslim Students Association. I think mine is more of a reflection than it is a question. I was privileged enough to attend the 20th celebration of the Constitution in Parliament last year, beginning of last year. And I also it was at a time when young people across the country were protesting for free education. So I think my reflection today is just perhaps on the Universal Declaration as a document and how it speaks to the extension of human rights perhaps to higher education, because we know that so many young people in the country are unfortunately without access to higher education, even with the recent announcement of free education for those people with household incomes of under 350,000 rand. So I think perhaps my question then is, in reflecting to the panel, how is it that we can ensure that this access is ensured for all people? Because while there's an announcement and a commitment from government, we don't really have the practical and physical, tangible solutions yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 2 was this side. Who has the mic this side? What happened to the mic this side? All right, that's fine.
Okay, I think mine also is not much of a question, but a reflection. As I'm listening to the speakers, I just come to the realization of how much value people like Justice have. And if they could share these stories with young people on a daily basis, or at least once a week, how much of an impact it would have. For example, the story he gives us about Gandhi is one that I have never heard before. And the stories that you hear about Gandhi are normally the opposite of that. So I think that has been useful for me, and thank you.
I'm being told that we have to wrap up, but I'll give you, at least even if you raise the question and there are no responses. Yeah.
Good day, everybody. Okay. Hi. How are you guys doing? You know, when young people have to stand up and talk, we always feel, you know, a certain pressure from the prying eyes, but okay, let me go for it. I am Kotatso Moloto, and I'm the founder and president of an organization that is called Voice in Action, that is aimed at creating innovative solutions to curb the heightened violent culture witnessed in our countries. Now, using the youth to create these solutions is going to be an important factor. My question is then, how involved is the youth in all activities? How involved is the youth? Is there a platform that allows youth to engage? Is there a platform that allows the youth to come in and sit in with the president, where they can learn, because it is important for young people to learn how things are being done, because we are the future leaders. Every human being has a right to life. Every human being has a right to life. But there is a responsibility to uphold the dignity of this right. And young people need to know this. But how do we learn this? We need to have more engagements. We need to have more platforms. Thank you very much. Stand up for human rights. Hashtag Voice It in Action.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. I think the fourth speaker has, thank you very much for your understanding. I would like to thank our guests for the reflections. I'm sure each one of you have had an opportunity to reflect on your own. Let's continue to reflect, but also commit. The purpose of reflection is to commit to the concept of human rights. My right must not infringe on the next person's right. Thank you very much. We will allow Tulani, where are you? Yeah, you will receive the president with your music. So our entertainment is by Tulani, I was told. And already it started. And so
Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. As they have said, my name is Tulani Likuleni, and this is Dieho on the pianos. I think there wouldn't be a better song to commemorate this occasion that we have. The struggle continues. My people, open your eyes and answer the call of the drum, rhythm of limo. Your eternal flame has shown us the light of dawn. You can sing along if you know the song. Dance if you like dancing. This is not a funeral, right, guys?
Yes.
My people, open your eyes and answer the call of the drum. Freedom of your eternal flame has turned up the light. Oh, Mozambique, a luta continua, continua. In South Africa, a luta continua, continua. In Nigeria, a luta continua, continua.
That is our dear Miriam Makeba. May her soul rest in peace. Thank you very much. Welcome, President. We waited for you in style, and we wanted that you enter in style. We started with Prahu, and we welcome you with our dear Miriam Makeba. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, this session is a session where our leaders here, it's an international session, where our leaders here are also reflecting on the declaration, and our president will also reflect on our constitution and the journey traveled. You will recall that our president was there traversing the country, making sure that the views of South Africans are heard, so that we draft a constitution that we all feel talks to us. So at this point, I will like to ask the ambassador of the EU, Ambassador Konaro, to the European Union travel the journey with South Africans, and they continue to travel the journey of our democracy with us. So over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairperson of the Foundation for Human Rights. Mr. President, an honor to stand here, an honor to be also here with the panel. And let me just use the banner against which the President is sitting here just to briefly sketch why I think there's a few things to share on behalf of the European Union. And let me start off by just picking up on the 70 years we mark today for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, when the European Union had sort of its fledgling beginnings 60 years ago. It was really thanks to the banner, thanks to the umbrella, and thanks to the advocacy we felt back in Europe, given by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and more broadly, the international values that allowed the European Union to grow in what we are now today. And I think, High Commissioner, I think it's fair to say that we have grown very well together. Meanwhile, also the European Union has a strong mandate also, not only to promote these values back home with member states in our own social fabric, but also very much to make sure that we remain a strong advocate, a strong supporter, and a strong voice in bringing this out in partnership with countries like South Africa. And this is why I'm proud to see the European Union flag also in partnership, teaming up with that process. This mandate also has brought us to work very early with the Foundation for Human Rights, with the Ministry of Justice. Minister, thank you very much for your introductory remarks. It has brought us very close to Selo Hatang and the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the Sisulu family with Eleanor and Max Sisulu, and many of these aspects. And yes, I think taking this now to the UN level, never ever has the European Union and the UN felt so closely together when, in fact, the principles which we are marking here today are facing more headwinds than you would have thought we are facing a few years ago. And this is why I'm very, very proud to say that we do benefit from a very strong and growing cooperation with the UN in general, but also the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner in particular. And the last logo, Mr. President, brings me back to the strength of the European Union-South African partnership. It was such an honor to have had you in Brussels and also at the European Parliament before not too long. And I think I can proudly tell the audience that the birthday here today, the 70th birthday, will benefit from a reinforced and strengthened partnership also between the European Union and South Africa. With those words, thank you very much, and happy birthday, the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those words, those kind words, and your continued commitment to our country. I would like now to, if you look at the declaration there, you'll be amused to see that it is so gender-blind, it is not funny. But you remember how many years ago it was, and when you look at the leadership of the United Nations, you can see that we have moved, haven't we, as the world? We are very proud. I would like now to call on Ms. Nados Begele Thomas, the UN Resident Coordinator for South Africa, to introduce the High Commissioner who is here to celebrate 70 years of the declaration. Over to you, ma'am.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Honorable Minister of Justice and Constitutional Services and Affairs, I should put, the ministers and deputy ministers here today, the CEO of Nelson Mandela Foundation, the EU Ambassador to South Africa, members of the Mandela and Sisulu families, ambassadors and members of the diplomatic corps, my colleagues from the UN, civil society representatives, dear friends and members of the UN family, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we have gathered to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and this moment must do more for us than just be another event where we mark a day in the calendar. We have to use this day to reflect on the realities that necessitated the global community to come together and agree on a set of principles that were meant to safeguard the collective interest of all peoples of the world, and we must use this momentum to reaffirm our commitment to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and all that it represents. For South Africa, the sense of occasion is enhanced because this year's commemoration coincides with the national and global centenary celebrations of Mama Sisulu and former President Mandela, who have proven to the world that it is possible to uphold the values espoused in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, even when faced with the worst kind of atrocities. The current and future generations of South Africans are challenged, therefore, to live the legacy of their forebears and continue to keep the torch burning and pass the light of hope to their succeeding generations. Ladies and gentlemen, it would seem that this was the design of humanity's conscience to bring such important leaders of the global human rights movement together with South African historic relationship to the Universal Declaration and its influence on the South African Constitution. This is an important moment for pause, reflection, and re-engagement. It is also one that calls on all of us to take a stand and stand up for human rights, stand for dignity, stand for equality, stand for non-discrimination, and stand for leaving no one behind. For together, we are stronger in both word and deeds. We must acknowledge that South Africa has made great strides in the promotion and protection of human rights and has contributed to the global human rights movement. The Constitution is the foundation of the country's democracy, which reaffirms the values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. It not only emulates the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but it has paved the way for demonstrating that economic, social, and cultural elements of development are compatible and indivisible. Yet, like many other countries in the world, South Africa is not spared of inherent internal and external challenges, and our collective efforts are required to address South Africa's triple challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, as well as implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. The human rights lens can assist us in sharpening our focus and ensuring the way we pay attention to the most critical issue of inequality, which puts South Africa as the most unequal society in the globe. Your Excellency, the occasion also coincides with the 16th day of activism against women and child abuse, and this is one area where we need to respond. Through the recent Gender Summit, we have been exposed to the breakdown of values and high levels of violence that permeates through South African society, and this is one of the most glaring transgressions of human rights that confronts all of us, and we are very grateful of your commitment to address this crisis with an emergency response, Mr. President. To this effect, the United Nations Development System in South Africa will, as usual, avail all its resources to the nation in finding rapid solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, the High Commissioner is here with us today as the most senior United Nations official responsible for human rights. She is also the authoritative voice of all people who face discrimination, human rights violations, and abuses, and those who are left wanting of basic freedoms. I'm sure that you will agree with me that her task is not an easy one. It's not an easy one, especially in a world where the hard-won gains of human rights, as contained in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, seem under attack. Her voice is not only critical for victims and in assisting governments, it's also fundamental to the work that the United Nations does. We are extremely fortunate to have someone like Ms. Michelle Bachelet in office. She has all the attributes of courage, perseverance, passion, and a deep commitment to human rights. Ms. Bachelet understands human rights at its core. At a very early age, she had to endure loss of family, imprisonment, torture, and exile due to the dictatorship in her native country of Chile. Overcoming these experiences, Ms. Bachelet opted to dedicate her life to public service. She graduated in medicine upon returning to Chile and started her career as a pediatrician, healing and helping those around her, including children victims of political violence. She also dedicated herself to all forms of study, including in military strategy. Through her engagement in politics and governance, she has, in the past 30 years, broken all the glass ceilings. She was appointed Minister of Health in 2000, the first woman in Latin America named Minister of Defense in 2002, and in 2006, she was elected as the first female president of Chile, a position she was re-elected to in 2014 until earlier this year. Throughout her career, Ms. Bachelet has been an ardent promoter of human rights for all, in particular the most vulnerable. During her tenure as head of states, she made it a priority to promote the economic, social, and political empowerment of women and putting an end to gender-based violence. It is in this commitment and track record that led Ms. Bachelet to be appointed the first executive director of UN Women in 2011, and most recently, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Madam High Commissioner, we are honored that you choose to come to South Africa so early in your tenure. It's not only your first visit to the Rainbow Nation as High Commissioner, but also your first to Africa, the heartbeat of the world. We owe it to South Africa and the world to mark this important moment and ensure that it speaks to we, the people of this beautiful nation. Madam High Commissioner, the floor is yours. You're most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, Mr. Minister, ambassadors, excellencies, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Sani Bonani. I hope I said it correctly. Yeah, that's great, thank you. I'm so very happy to be among you in this very symbolic week and in this place teeming with history. Happy to once again be in this country of human rights defenders, this country which has struggled so resolutely against discrimination and degradation of human beings. Happy to be in this living museum of the triumph over injustice, this Constitution Hill, which once saw the incarceration of Nelson Mandela, Albertina Sisulu, and other heroes, and today is home to this country's admirable Constitutional Court. And I'm most thankful to be among people with such different profiles from so many generations. And I'm happy that we have some young people here too, because young people also always take for granted what you have, because you didn't have the experience to live under apartheid or under a dictatorship. So we need you to raise the flags of the human rights and continue on when we're not there. So, as I said, people from different profiles, so many generations, to mark the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the centenaries of both Albertina Sisulu and Nelson Mandela. I have to make a confession that the Foundation of Nelson Mandela knows. Every time I've been asked in my life, which has been my political icons or my political idols, I would say that it's Nelson Mandela, the one who has inspired me in my political life. This is an occasion to celebrate what South Africa has meant for the international human rights community in these 7 decades and what the Universal Declaration has meant to the people of this country. Sani Banani, I see you. I honor your struggle for justice, human rights, and freedom. Your steadfast conviction that every individual matters, and we are all born equal in dignity and rights. I honor that force of conviction which binds us together and which cannot be destroyed. I honor our history, the intense and enduring concern for the injustice of apartheid, repeatedly voiced in the United Nations, and leading to the adoption of the Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid in 1973. The great bridge that led from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to the 1955 Freedom Charter, which cried out, "The people shall govern," and brought together people of all races to work on a non-racial and democratic state. I honor the Constitution of this great country, which drew inspiration from the Universal Declaration and was signed into law on International Human Rights Day in 1996 at the site of the Sharpeville massacre. I honor the tremendous contributions made by the non-racial democratic state to the cause of human rights, a beacon of hope for the rest of the world, seeking systems for greater justice, deeper respect, and to end to inequality. I acknowledge and pay tribute to our partnership, the shared river of history which runs between us, thanks to the work and the example of so many of our forefathers and mothers. Because of the courage of the struggle of human rights defenders, much progress towards the common standard laid out in the Universal Declaration has been achieved. Mandela and Mama Sisulu, and so many others, have inspired and greatly assisted our work across the world. Indeed, the entire human rights movement of South Africa has inspired us, with its reminder that no matter how brutal or how bitter life may be, the human spirit can overcome every kind of obstacle. South Africans have taught us the power of the people's protest against oppression and the force of justice to change minds and transform the world. Mama Sisulu and other South African women taught us to emulate their fearlessness, their tremendous strength and their fortitude, to tribute to this country's struggle. No tribute to this country's struggle for freedom will be complete without recognition of their role. And so it is particularly fitting that I should come to this country, to South Africa, in the days leading up to our 70th Human Rights Day, and also 70 years of the Convention Against Genocide. So in times of, in the world, severe restriction to civic participation in many countries around the world, there could be no better place to speak out in favor of the contribution of civic activism, youth, and social movements to strengthen social harmony and sustainable development. The ability of individuals and groups to speak out, demand justice, and express critical opinions is vital to creating a resilient and participative society. It is essential to meeting the challenges facing every state. Some other parts of the world saying that the Declaration is only an example of Western beliefs. That's not true. I think every woman in the world, wherever region of the world lives, whatever ethnic group it comes from, whatever culture, or whatever is a man, a woman, a child. I mean, that woman, for example, that father wants his child or her child to be fed, to be warm when it's cold, wants to have the possibility to speak out when things are not going well, wants to be able to organize. Those are not Western values. Those are universal values. And that's the reality of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But I have to mention also, because many people don't say, that the commissioner who drafted the declaration came from many different parts of the world. Came even from Chile, from many other countries, from Africa too, some from India. There was women, Eleanor Roosevelt from the US, that was a chair of the commission, but there was this woman, this Indian woman, and she's the one, thanks to her, because at that time, it was said, following the French Declaration of Human Rights, it was called the Déclaration des Droits de l'Homme, and at that time, men included women. And she said, that's not fair, because women's rights will not be considered. So that's why in the Declaration, you will find all human beings, talking about all of us. So I need to say that, because I think when we study and study more of what this is meant, it's so essential. And I think we need to, that's why we need to revitalize our commitment to those fundamental principles, and we need of human rights, and we need to use this great anniversary to gather support and to push forward with the work of creating fair and inclusive societies across the world. We owe this to the giants of the past who guide us by their example, and we owe this create a just, equitable, and inclusive society where all are able to share in the benefits of freedom. The legacy of apartheid has left a lasting imprint. We face the significant challenges of poverty, inequality, unemployment, as well as high levels of violence against women and gender-related killings. But you have taught the world that together we can triumph over these challenges. Together we can build societies that are fairer, more respectful, and more equal. We can forge a united and caring society committed to the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom, and the principles of Ubuntu and Bato Pele, the basis of South Africa's constitution, as well as for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you, High Commissioner, for those kind words, asking us to revive our commitment to human rights towards building inclusive societies. Thank you, we will remember those words. I would like to acknowledge, I saw religious leaders who are also present. Please accept our appreciation for your attendance today. At this point, I would like to request the Minister of Justice, Minister Masuta, to introduce the President. And as the President was coming in, Mr. President, I was reminded of some funeral where a young man said, yo, 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 yo. You remember that? So we are all feeling yo, 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 that you are here. We really appreciate your presence. Please, Minister, introduce the President.
Program Director and Chair of the Foundation for Human Rights, the High Commissioner, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and the resident Coordinator of the United Nations in the Republic, the European High Commissioner, all other members of the diplomatic corps, the Justice of the Constitutional Court, Justice Albie, all other dignitaries present, and as they say, all protocol observed. I've been asked to introduce somebody who needs no introduction, so instead, may I beg your indulgence and rather choose to actually usher him to the podium, because as you'd agree with me, if I were to attempt to do so, all I can do is to diminish the towering achievements that his personality represents, except for one, and which I consider to be relevant on this occasion, as we celebrate 70 years of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and of course, in particular, in a South African context, as we commemorate the signing 22 years ago by Utata Madiba of our Constitution, which contains in it the Bill of Rights, which Constitution came to life as a result of the tireless work by the Constitutional Assembly under the leadership of our President. And if you allow me to invite the President to address us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Program Director. Program Director. United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights, Ms. Michelle Bachelet. And let me immediately say, all protocol observed, but to recognize Justice Albie, who I haven't seen for a long time, who taught me a lot about human rights. So if you ever wanted to know, Ms. Bachelet, where I got my lessons about human rights, there's the man who taught me a lot. Thank you very much. It is a real honor for me to have this opportunity, and it is actually a privilege that we as South Africans who are here are able to join various countries around the world to mark the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I would like to particularly welcome the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ms. Michelle Bachelet, and congratulate her on her appointment to such a very high and important position. We congratulate you. We, as South Africans, look forward to working with you in advancing the aims of your office and playing our part in entrenching a culture of human rights, not just in South Africa, but on our own continent as well as around the globe. Today, we stand on ground heavy with history, a place of both tragedy and triumph, once a prison where the apartheid regime enforced control and terror. This is now the seat of the highest court in our land that was set up to defend the basic human rights of our people. Constitution Hill is more than a monument to the past. It is a testament to the resilience as well as the unshakable strength of the human spirit. The founder of our democracy, President Nelson Mandela, was incarcerated here twice at the Old Fort in the early 60s. When he returned decades later to open the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory and Commemoration, he spoke poignantly of his experience and of the former jail being turned into a place of commemoration so that future generations will remember that their freedom was built on. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted at a time when the nations of the world were etched with the scars of war. It too is a reminder to current and future generations of what our freedom has been built on. The values that it espouses of equality, freedom, and dignity bind us together as the universal fellowship of humanity. They commit us to building a world that is free of oppression and discrimination. The Declaration is implicit in its rejection of movements or organizations, in its rejection of ideologies and doctrines that seek to divide us. It is a rejection of racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, and all other forms of bigotry and prejudice. This historic declaration, this manifestation of humanity's common conscience, significantly influenced the development of South Africa's constitutional order. It is no coincidence that our constitution was signed into law by Nelson Mandela on the same day that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights had been adopted by the United Nations General Assembly 48 years earlier. 24 years since the birth of democracy in South Africa, our constitutional order is vibrant, it is robust, and it is dynamic, and it is also in good health. Our Constitution, with its Bill of Rights, underpins our actions as a government working hard to improve the material conditions of our people, to uphold the rule of law, and to safeguard fundamental freedoms. It was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that contributed most to entrenching human rights principles into our law, perhaps more than any other international instrument. But it was also this document that helped to strengthen our resolve, to make us become much more committed to the struggle against apartheid, because it served as a reference point. And as we continued to prosecute our struggle, we continue to realize that we are not mad. The world has adopted a document which we would also like to see embraced in our own country. I had the privilege of being part of the team that was given the momentous task of drafting South Africa's first democratic constitution. It was a heady and exhilarating time, but also a daunting responsibility. Across the table were some of our former enemies, the very people who had violated the rights of many of our people, representing political parties still firmly stuck in the past, a past where a racial minority enjoyed rights and freedoms to the exclusion and at the expense of the majority. There were revolutionaries around the table, there were communists, there were white supremacists, there were nationalists, there were trade unionists, there were religious leaders, there were traditional leaders, kings and queens and princes and princesses, each bringing a particular worldview. But there were also ordinary people, and they were bringing a particular set of interests to the negotiating table. We heard from delegations representing business, labor, gender activists, and many other interest groups who wanted to have their say on a range of issues, from labor rights to land and property rights, to reproductive health, to minority language protection, and many others. The interests were many and were in galore. Foremost amongst our concerns was that the voices of the South African people should be heard. The Constitution was anchored in 34 constitutional principles that had been agreed to in the multi-party negotiations that adopted the interim constitution. They were the foundations of the Constitution's architecture and formed the bedrock of the constitutional order we wanted to realize. But all these had also had a prior iteration. As the struggle against apartheid raged, our forebears got together in Kliptown, where I am headed this afternoon after giving this speech, where they drafted the Freedom Charter, and it was that Freedom Charter that in many ways was also a mirror of what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights also contained. I head to to clip down were this document that fired up many of our people to continue struggling against apartheid. And this time round is to go and sign a promulgation of a clause that was contained in the Freedom Charter that dealt with a national minimum wage. The drafters, the forebears of our struggle, had inserted in the Freedom Charter a clause as they dealt with all other things, the right to vote, the right to health, the right for movement. They also dealt with the issue of a basic minimum wage, because the rights of workers in our country had been trashed and destroyed. And that document also formed the foundation stones of what our Constitution finally became grounded on. But it had also had a prior iteration, and this is where Justice Albie Sachs had played one of his defining roles, because it was the African National Congress that drafted the constitutional principles which President Oliver Tambo charged people like Judge Albie Sachs and others to draft principles that would underpin the constitution of a new and democratic South Africa. So our constitution was then grounded on all these wonderful documents that had been drafted, right as early as the 40s, when the African Claims document was drafted, the Freedom Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the constitutional principles that Oliver Tambo had declared should be drafted. That richness of wealth of intellectual property then made up what really made our task a lot easier as we put together South Africa's constitutional architecture. Principle 2 was a practical expression of the values that underpin, yes, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It said that everyone in South Africa would enjoy all universally accepted fundamental rights, freedoms, and civil liberties, which would be provided for and protected by the Constitution. The centrality of human rights in our law and the importance of having a Bill of Rights included in our Constitution is in no small part thanks to the enduring impact of a declaration that has proven to be as relevant as it is timeless. 70 years since it was adopted, South Africa reaffirms its commitment to upholding this pact between the peoples of the world. The same collaboration and consensus that defined the period during which we drafted our first constitution is what we seek to harness even now. While we have one of the most progressive constitutions in the world, particularly as it relates to socio-economic rights, there is a great deal of unfinished business. There is a disjuncture between what our Constitution promises and the lived reality of our people on the ground. For example, the right to gender equality promised by our Constitution is rendered meaningless unless the state and all social actors fulfill their obligation to put instruments in place to support the advancement of this right. Whether it is with setting up specialized sexual offenses courts or repealing laws that uphold discrimination against women, there must be a practical manifestation of this right. Similarly, outlawing discrimination on the basis of race, gender, religion, or sexual orientation is only effective if action is taken against those who continue to use discrimination as a measure of exclusion, be it in schools, in the workplace, in places of worship, or indeed in any other place. The burning issue of land, of access to land and ownership of land, has brought into sharp focus the reality that we still have to extend the property rights that are enshrined in our Constitution to all South Africans. And the property rights happen to be in the body of our Bill of Rights as well. It has also raised the issue that in order to fulfill the obligations contained in the Constitution, it may be necessary in certain circumstances to amend certain sections of the same Constitution. We will all be aware of the robust and welcome debates that have been taking place around the land issue and land ownership in South Africa. It is a sign of the health of our democracy that an extensive and wide-ranging process of public participation preceded the decision of our Parliament to adopt the resolutions and recommendations of a committee with regards to land expropriation. At the same time, this process has been a barometer of public sentiment and also an affirmation of the resilience of our constitutional order. Our citizens have participated with a great deal of enthusiasm, showing that across the length and the breadth of the land, they still retain the utmost faith in our Constitution as the primary means by which their rights can be protected, by which their rights can be advanced and enforced. Our country is a relatively young democracy against the broader scheme of world constitutions and democracies. The gains we have registered are all the more extraordinary when one considers the legacy that an apartheid rule, that 25 years into democracy, we have been dealing with that legacy that entrenched itself, that became conventions, traditions, laws, and practices, and broader societal influence. We have had a huge job cut out for us. But we know that for those who are still affected by poverty, by the legacy of dispossession, and also by underdevelopment, our progress in erasing the legacy of colonialism and apartheid has not been fast enough. We know that transforming our economy, that transforming the patterns of control and ownership of our economy is an imperative. We recognize that whether it is access to land or the provision of basic services, we have to give expression to the rights of our people as entrenched in our Bill of Rights. For a constitution to be relevant, it must be a constitution that has life. It must be a constitution that people can see is alive and is able to act as a shield and defend their rights. It must be a constitution that breathes. It is neither static nor sacrosanct. It can and indeed must be responsive to the circumstances and conditions of the day, while addressing the lived reality of ordinary people on the ground, but also while living and remaining true to the principles and the values that it underpins or underpin it. We are proud of the human rights culture that prevails in South Africa today and which guides our endeavors. We're also proud that Ms. Bachelet, our own Human Rights Commission, stands at the ready and is always ready and prepared to safeguard the interests and the rights of our people. With able-minded people like the head of our Human Rights Commission, Mr. Majola here, we know that indeed our human rights as a nation is in good hands. Our constitutional order was won through the sheer determination of our people, and many of our people paid a harsh price to see this realized. We owe it to the memories of Mandela, Sisulu, and many other freedom fighters of our country to keep the faith in our Constitution alive. Far too many of our people still live in squalor and misery, denied opportunity and a chance to better their lives because of poverty, lack of a decent education, and other forms of disadvantage. In delivering the landmark Grootboom judgment 18 years ago, which concerned a group of people who occupied private land earmarked for low-cost housing, Justice Yaqub wrote, "The issues here remind us of the intolerable conditions under which many of our people are still living. It is also a reminder that unless the plight of these communities is alleviated, people may be tempted to take the law into their own hands to escape these conditions," he said. This is a reminder that our Constitution is the most potent instrument we have to change the lives of our people. It is the means through which we are able to protect the vulnerable against the abuse of power. The Constitution must never be seen as a constraint to progress or a barrier to transformation. The Constitution is a means by which we maintain our commitment to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the need to protect the inalienable right of every human being to live a life of freedom, a life of dignity, is what brought the nations of the world together 70 years ago. It was also the fiber that connected the drafters of our Constitution. It is what energizes and motivates us today as we seek to advance these rights, not just for our own people, but for all of humanity. We should take great pride that a culture of human rights continues to take root across the globe, even in parts of the world once associated with repression. Human rights are universal. They are not relative. For as long as only some enjoy them and others don't, our task is not over. For as long as some still face discrimination, oppression, and exploitation, none of us can be truly free. Let us therefore join hands in promoting human rights across the globe so that all people can enjoy the freedoms that we so dearly cherish, and so that we can breathe a better, fairer, and world to the generations that follow. Ms. Bachelet, the final paragraph of our Freedom Charter, which was drafted in 1955, speaks precisely to this issue when it says that these rights we will fight for throughout our lives, and we will use every means possible until those rights are achieved. Today, we celebrate a great moment in the history of mankind, or humankind, that took place 70 years ago. At its essence, however, this occasion is not so much about the past. This should be about celebrating the future work that we are all going to do to ensure that we continue to protect and advance the human rights of all of humankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just two comments. First one being that you have told us in no uncertain terms that there is a great deal of unfinished business. We are all aware of that. And secondly, you have said to us we must keep the future of the faith of our Constitution alive. And I would like to say, Mr. President, in the audience here are members of civil society organizations who are our partners as NGOs, as religious leaders, in ensuring that our Constitution and the concept of human rights, as enshrined in what the President at the time said, never again. And we want to commit to that. We are your partners in that. And lastly, we are now, ladies and gentlemen, going to allow the President and the UN High Commissioners, our dignitaries, to go and sign the declaration in the canvas there and our Constitution as a reminder of where we have come from and the journey traveled and where we would like to go as nations of the world. And I would like to say, Mr. President, in that table there are Sisulu great-grandchildren who have sat so quietly and peacefully listened to all the speeches. So I think they need to be acknowledged by raising their little hands, and we want to say, thank you, little ones. The future is good. Thank you. Let me then allow the President, we will ask protocol to allow the President and the High Commissioner, I don't know which way, this way, this way. The President is going to greet now. I told you I messed you up. Yes. Yes. The High Commissioner is signing the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. The President is signing. The Minister is signing the Constitution of the Republic. And the coordinator for the EU ambassador is also signing. And the UN coordinator for South Africa is also signing the Constitution. And then we are going to have the signing of the declaration, ladies and gentlemen. The minister is signing. UN coordinator. The ambassador, the EU ambassador. We will have the chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission also signing. And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to thank the President as they are about to leave. As he said, he's moving to his next engagement. And we would like to thank the President for honoring our occasion. At this point, I guess we will all have an opportunity to append our signatures on the two canvases. Let's take a break for 15 minutes. You have been wonderful. You listened throughout the morning. 15 minutes, please, for tea. I need to be advised where tea is. Tea is outside. Ladies and gentlemen, please go and get your refreshments outside. We will have our next panel. We would like to welcome our Deputy Minister of Justice. Thank you.
You fell off your